Hi, it's John from Crafts by John UK. Today's project is this clean and simple card with a butterfly image, a little bit of colouring around the edge and a sentiment that says have a beautiful day. I've used the Morpho number 548 stamp set by All and Create for the butterfly image, and then I've also used the Mescellaneous from Visible Image for the mesh around the edges. If you're interested in how I've done this, stay tuned and I will go through the steps for you. Okay, I've done this video a little bit fast forwarded because it's quite lengthy and I'm just going to kind of talk through the steps. So first of all, I've taken my piece of watercolour paper. This is quite a heavy 300 GSM and I'm just cutting out a piece and the size that I want. I could have done this clearly on my guillotine, but I actually decided to just do it with a ruler and then kind of regretted it because it takes a while. But anyway, I've literally cut out a piece of card the size I want, and basically I've used the size of the stamp to determine the size of the piece, because I want to do this as a panel card, so I only really wanted it exactly the size that I needed it. What I've then done is obviously I've put my paper into my stamping platform. This is a brand new stamp, so you can see there I'm kind of working it in my hands, just getting any dust off it from the manufacturing process before laying it down, and then obviously using my stamping platform to line it up. Now what you will notice is that my ink pad is terribly dried up. I think it takes at least 3 or 4 impressions to actually get a decent a quality image. When I take it away, you'll see just how grey it is. I really did need to replace it, but I'm not into re-inking. I tend to just buy a new one. They're only £5 or £6, so I tend to just use them right up until the last moment and then chuck them. So this one has now gone in the bin. But anyway, I've inked obviously the stamp. I've got a good impression from 3 attempts. I'm just embossing it with some clear embossing powder because I'm going to colour it with water, so I want to really set the image. I'm using my heat tool here, so apologies it's slightly out of focus, but obviously the button on the end of my heat tool is beautifully in focus. So I'm working my way around the image. I'm just heating that up so that it's nice and set. I'm also heating the back just to make sure that the paper doesn't bend too badly, and then I'm just cleaning off my stamp. I always use a cloth to clean my stamps. Don't use wet wipes because they leave loose fibres on your stamps, and also they're not very good for the environment. I also put my stamps away as I go along, something I always say. The sentiment I've used is one from this set. It's just quite a cute one. And basically I'm just going to stamp that on a separate piece of card. As I said at the beginning, this is a very clean and simple card, so I just wanted 2 things on there and some white space. So I'm just using this have a beautiful day sentiment, and I'm just stamping it on a matching piece of card from the same watercolour pad so that the card is the same colour. Although I do colour the sentiment piece anyway separately in the same colours that I use in the card. So I'm heat embossing that as well, just to set it, giving the stamp a clean, and obviously putting that away. There's some nice sentiments on this set which I will use, and this is an All and Create set as well. It's got a happy birthday on there, happy anniversary, enjoy the little things in life. There's some really nice ones. So I've now got my 2 panels, and I'm going to use some distress inks. And what I've done, first of all, I've laid a base coat of colour down on the butterfly. I was going to colour it in pink and purple. So what I've done is I've used my distress inks to get kind of a base layer, and then I'm going to build the colour up using my Arteza watercolour pens as well. Doing this sometimes makes life easier, sometimes makes it more difficult. I just kind of decided I wanted to use the colours underneath that I'm going to use to go around the edge of the panel as well. So you can see that I'm just using a paintbrush, a little bit of distress ink on an acrylic block with a little spritz from my distress sprayer, and then basically I've just coloured that in. Obviously clean that off, and then I'm going then for the more vibrant colours, obviously using the Arteza watercolour pens. I love those, and I do tend to use them a lot on anything that's realistic, like an animal or plants, etc. I just find they're really good. What I do find though is if you have that base layer, the colours do blend easier. You only need a slight piece from the Arteza pen, and then you can drag it down using a water brush just to blend that in. So I'm using a kind of a bright pink, a purple, similar tones to the distress inks that I've used in pinks and purples underneath. You can see that I'm colouring kind of on the ribs of the wings, and then I'm pulling the colour away so that it kind of creates a 3D effect. I think at some point I do hold it up so you can see it in slightly more detail. But basically I just wanted a kind of pinks and purples basically. I love colouring with my watercolour pens. They are brilliant, and you really don't need to use a lot. These are the same ones I've had now for I think probably 3 or 4 years. Haven't had to replace a single one yet. They last so long, and they are really good at getting depth and shadow, etc. There you go. So you can see my butterfly now coloured. And then I think I use a grey for the body if I've not already done it. And then basically I start with the edging. So I'm using a little brush in this instance and a piece of card to just hold the project. And I'm just putting down some colour. So I've gone around the edges first of all with the pink. This is Kitsch Flamingo, I believe, from the Distress Ink range by Ranger and Tim Holtz. So I'm kind of working my way around the edges. Looks a little bit odd because obviously I'm speeding this video up a little bit. But I'm just laying down some base colour. I want a white and plain and simple look overall, but for this panel I wanted it to have some matching colours to the actual colours of the project that's stamped in the middle. So I've kind of gone all the way around with the pink, and then what you'll see is I just use the purple to edge the corners. So I'm trying to create just a little bit of depth on the corners. It all adds to the overall effect, creates a slightly 3D effect. So I'm working away mostly at the corners, as you can see. It's not so clear when it's sped up a little bit, but I don't want to bore you to death with colouring. And then on the sentiment, what I've done is I've just coloured one end pink, one end purple, basically just to give it a bit of depth, and also obviously tie that panel alongside the panel with the image. So I'm probably now going to cut that out, and you can see there I am with my ruler, just doing it by eye basically, just to get a roughly even line up. I'm actually using my cutting mat grid to just kind of work that out. And then basically I think I'll probably go around the edges. So I'm doing this to just get some colour on the edges of that panel, but I probably also go over it with a proper brush as well. I'm probably going to use one of my little foam pads on a tool. Right, now this is the other stamp set. So this is an edging set from Visible Image, and I'm going to use it just to sort of stamp some interest around the edge. I'm using the VersaFine clear inks now, so there's a nice purple in there, and you can see this is almost like a chain link fence. So I kind of used it in a random way. I just checked how bold it was, and I think I've sort of stamped off with it, and I've stamped on with it so that I've got different degrees of texture. So you can see there, some I'm using straight ink, some I'm using a secondary stamp just to give it some depth, just to give it a bit of difference. You can see there now it's kind of softened those edges slightly, and it looks good with the Distress Ink underneath. Next, I'm using obviously some ink to try and create a little bit more depth. I did actually try with the VersaFine, but that didn't work so well, so I went back to the old Distress Oxides or Distress Inks, and I'm literally colouring in some of the cells. This is again all to just give it a little bit more depth, a little bit more texture, make it look more interesting for the end recipient. So you can see I'm colouring in some cells. I'm just using a basic paintbrush for this, using a bit more ink if I need to, but basically I'm just trying to give it some depth. So my centre panel's pretty much finished now, which is good. Got all my colouring on there, got my edges interesting, and then I'm literally going around the edges now with the sponge just so that it's not got white edges, because I'm going to mount it on black and I don't want a strip of white glaring at me between the purple and the black. So I'm going around the edges with a domed sponge there just to give it a little bit of colour, also adding a little bit more on top, all to create depth. So that's our centre panel finished. Then much the same with the sentiment panel as well, just adding ink on the edges and just darkening the edges of the actual strip as well, so sides and edges. Cleaning my project and then kind of deciding where I'm going to put stuff. So first thing I do is I mount the sentiment on a piece of black paper. I'm going to give it a black edging. As I said at the beginning, this is a clean and simple project, so both panels are going to be stuck on white card, blank. So I want a little black border around both just to give them a little bit of oomph basically. Kind of draws the eye, it looks good. Cutting those out by hand, just roughly basically. So that one's ready to go, and then I'm just using my bone folder to flatten down those edges. Looking at the placement and thinking, should I put it on top of the project or should I put it separately? But one thing that's certain is that I do need to mount the actual butterfly piece on black card as well. Grabbing a card blank, this is 6x6, using my bone folder obviously to just making sure that that's fully down. Kind of looking how it looks. but for sure I need to add black underneath the main panel. So I'm going to use some matching black card there, and again just using my wet glue so I've got wiggle room. Just going to stick that down. Because this is watercolour card and it's quite nice and thick, I'm not going to get any problems with rippling or anything like that. Just using my hand just to lay that down, and then similarly cutting that with my ruler and my craft knife. So I've now got my two panels. So now I'm obviously going to consider placement. Ultimately I decide top left with my butterfly, bottom right with my sentiment. Kind of uses the whole panel, looks intentional. I'm making sure that the borders around the top left and left hand side are sort of even, and then in terms of placement you can see that I end up putting my sentiment strip kind of to the bottom right. And I just measure to make sure that that's even, and then I'm using my bone folder just to press everything down, and then I add a couple of simple gems on the actual project and the sentiment strip to try and tie it all together. That's a very dark purple. It kind of looks blue in this light, but it's a purple and a light pink basically. Just adds a little bit of sparkle and a little bit of interest on a kind of random style card. There we go, and we're done. Thanks for watching today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Obviously this is a sped up one, it's quick and easy, but hopefully you've been able to follow along. If you've enjoyed it, please give me a like and consider subscribing to my channel. You'll find me Crafts by John UK on Etsy, where I actually sell cards, on TikTok, which features some of my shorter videos, YouTube obviously where you are, and also on Instagram. I hope you've enjoyed watching. I hope you found that fun, and more projects to come, more different styles to show. Thank you.